Hello and welcome. I'm Zilla, and this is my live stream, Ancient Gaming, where I play games with ancient studies content and talk about it. This is my third week of streaming this game, Melos, which is a visual novel set in probably around 600 BCE Greece. Not exactly sure where. Um, and as I've had pointed out to me, this is from a game jam, so it is free to play on the internet. You can see the URL up at the top of the screen there, because I don't know how to use OBS as well as I would like. But anyway, you can go find this on the internet and play it yourself. There are, I think, 4 endings, and we're only going to go to get one of them. So you may hear that the music this time is turned down a little since last time. It should be pretty quiet now. Hopefully you can hear it a little bit. That's because last time the music actually got claimed, and I don't want to not give credit to the person who made the music, but since this was made at a game jam, it's very likely that it was just fair use stuff on the internet. So I can't find good information about where exactly this came from, whether that claim was correct or not, but just so you know, the context of this is using public domain or fair use of various art pieces, including the backgrounds, including the music. Only the hand-drawn stuff here is original to the game, though, and the text, obviously. So with that being said, let's return to the content. So far in game, we have learned that our point of view character, our narrator, is a a singer called Ambrosia, which is probably not a very normal name, but perhaps a nickname. Ambrosia being the food of the gods, immortality. And her crush is her traveling companion, Antiope, who is drawn for us on screen here, in sort of a very statuesque, simple but very expensive costume. It's quite possible that she is from the Amazonian culture, Antiope being an Amazonian name. I did remember who Antiope is specifically. She is the wife of Theseus. So if you're familiar with this part of Greek mythology, one of the exploits of Hercules, and Theseus being the sort of Athenian native hero, so we get a lot of stories about him, because a lot of our evidence is from Athens, a lot of our written evidence. So both of them go off to the land of the Amazons. Heracles is determined to bring back the belt of the queen of the Amazons, Hippolyta. And there are different versions of this story. A lot of times he ends up having a kid with her, whatever. Sometimes he gets married to her. And Theseus takes to wife her sister, Antiope. Now, when we say marry or take to wife or even just had a kid with, what we often in the ancient world actually mean is rape. It's often a forceful sexual encounter or even a kidnapping. And usually when we talk about Antiope, we are talking about a kidnapping. He takes her captive, brings her back to Athens, has a child with her, and then she escapes back to her homeland or dies, depending on which version you read. Her son is one of my absolute faves, which I cannot believe that I forgot his mother's name, is named Hippolytus. Yes, you can see that he's named after his aunt Hippolyta. And he is a follower of Artemis to the point that he actually offends Aphrodite. He is one of the characters that I will commonly use as an example of an ancient depiction of asexuality, and particularly sex-repulsed asexuality. There's a whole lot of mythology around that that I would be happy to go into at some point. But let's play the game. So we're sitting having a conversation with our Antiope, and she has just given us some wine to drink, which we took. Uh, it seems that there's a little bit of a glitch with saving in the game. It's supposed to be able to save your state if you log in, but I haven't managed to get that to work, so I'm having to re-find where we were last time each time I log in. So please forgive me if I'm off by a scene or two. But we're sitting down having a conversation with her. Ambrosia's taking a sip of wine, and apparently Antiope is devouring some kind of meat pie. So, one thing I want to talk about in this phrasing here. As I suspected, the wine is quite pure but good. I don't know if this is what they intended, because it seems like the developers had a little bit of trouble with some of the more particular English phrasing, which, no shade on that, that happens all the time. But so I can't tell whether this is an accident or if they knew something about this, but it's really interesting because one of the things that the Greeks did famously is they watered their wine. And sometimes to the point where you might say they wined their water. And part of this is because fresh water is often actually not safe to drink, especially if it's taken from some place that's even vaguely stagnant. Because you can't tell, if you're in a river, you can't tell, like, if there's a big dump of animal waste up the stream contaminating the water or whatever. And the more stagnant it is, the more microfauna you're going to find in there. So when you add a little bit of alcohol, that actually purifies the water enough that you can safely drink it. And so watered wine is the normal drink for people in ancient Greece. If you go over to Egypt, it was beer, because they have more grain from the floodplains than they do grapes like they have in Greece and Rome. So usually watered wine is the norm, and it was considered barbaric to have unmixed wine, pure wine, because that gets you drunk quicker, which leads to indecorous acts. So this might be another hint to us of Antiope's foreign origins. The alcohol shouldn't have had time to kick in so quickly, but I feel a little bolder after the last drop. I put back the empty receptacle on the table with more energy than I planned to, and the clap sound attracts Antiope's attention. She points out the bottle in an obvious silent question. So they're not saying cup or goblet here, and that's actually pretty reasonable because usually the Greeks would be drinking out of some kind of bowl. They often call these a kylix. That's a sort of flat bowl with a small handle on one side. And sometimes it even has a little like spout on the other side so that you would drink it like this. And there's actually a Greek drinking game that we have a lot of evidence for, taking the last drop of wine and seeing who can fling it the furthest with their kylix. Now, bottle is actually an interesting anachronism because they wouldn't have had bottles. They might have had pitchers or amphorae of wine, but most likely what they would have is actually a big mixing bowl of wine so that you can mix the water and wine. I think we better stop there. Your loss, says Antiope. From one hand, Antiope refills her own cup and gulps it straight away. From the other, she continues eating. The conversation somehow launched. I try to guide it to the subject I want to address. Do you remember our first days together? We were going to Delphi by the land road. So, the geography of Greece. We have sort of the mainland in two parts. We have the sort of main piece that includes like Thessaloniki and places like that, and Athens, and it kind of ends with Corinth at the Isthmus, and then the Peloponnese Peninsula below that. And then there are the hundreds of islands in the Cyclades. The further you can, depending on when and how you define things, you could define, maybe Crete as the most southern island of Greece, or maybe along the Egyptian coast and the Libyan coast. There are lots of Greek colonies out there, which means, cities where Greek people lived. Certainly up along the side of what we would call Turkey, they called Ionia, all the way out to Sicily. So when they say they're going to Delphi by the land road, Delphi is, well, I can look this up actually. Let's just be nerdy for a moment. Yes, take me to just the map, please. Okay. Thanks, Delphi is located in Greece. What happened to the little icon? Ugh, so irritating. Okay, that's better. So here you can see what I was talking about. So you have the part that's really a part of the European mainland here, Greece, and Athens down here at sort of the end of the mainland. Corinth is here. This is the Peloponnese. These are the Cyclades Islands, Ionian coast or Turkic coast, Crete, and further south is going to be Egypt. And Delphi is pretty much where the pin is. So when they say they're taking the land road, they are probably coming from somewhere on the mainland. They're not going to be coming from an island. They're not going to be coming from the coast over here, and probably somewhere relatively close, because if you were coming from, say, over here on the... I hope you can see this. I think you can. On the far coast, you would probably wind up taking a boat. So they're probably coming from somewhere relatively nearby. So why Delphi? Well, for one, Delphi is a major point of interest. It's a major city in ancient Greece. But the main thing that Delphi is known for is the grand oracle of Apollo. Now, it's not the only oracle of Apollo in Greece. There are several. There's an island. Oh my gosh. I've just lost the name of it in my head. I know this, but ADHD is a wonderful thing, friends. Sometimes the things you know very well just kind of blip out for a minute. I'll remember it later. Anyway, so Delphi is a place where people from all around the ancient world go to consult the oracle. There's a grand temple of Apollo. People, kings, rulers, anyone might give extraordinary gifts to the oracle. We have a lot of inscriptions, inscribed tripods, a tripod in this case being sort of a bowl with the three legs and a stand, and this is often a place to burn incense to the god. So this is the sort of thing that if you watched my streams on the Forgotten City, I pointed out the tripods and how realistic they were. Very common thing to see in devotions to a god, particularly Apollo, but really anyone. So Apollo being the god of prophecy, among other things, music and light, and that's sort of the direction of like high-mindedness. But really, like, prophecy is what he's known for. So, and if you're interested in comparative mythology, he's the god who slays the serpent. That's the story of the Python, and we get Pythian Apollo from that. So he's also associated with the Muses, who have their home on on the mountain where he slew the serpent. But the Pythia then is the name for the priestess of Apollo who speaks the prophecies. And they come out in riddles, and there's a whole priesthood built around interpreting those riddles and trying to interface between the god and the mortals who seek his blessing. Um, it is speculated, it is not 100% because it's hard to know with something like this, but it's speculated that there was a bubble of subterranean gases that leaked into the sanctum of Apollo there. And so what was really happening was that the Pythia would go and get high, and since a lot of times what you experience when you're high on certain things is what you expect to experience, they expected to be given prophecies by the gods, and so that's what they would experience, is the god embodying them or telling them or showing them a prophecy. And they would come out, and sometimes they would speak in tongues and the priests would interpret, or sometimes they would give very, in Greek riddles. And people recorded prophecies all the time. This is a very well-respected and well-regarded industry. So you can go to Delphi today and still see this. One of the things that I love the most about Delphi, what you can see there now, well, first of all, you can see sort of some of the various pieces of devotion to Apollo. One of the things that is there is the omphalos. And for those of you who are familiar with omphaloskepsis, you probably just went, huh? But yes, it's supposed to be the belly button of the world, the navel of the world. This stone supposed to be the center of the Earth's body. And it's still there. It's carved in this sort of rope-like pattern, a net, to sort of embody protection. And that centricity is supposed to be part of why the oracle is so powerful. But one of my favorite things there is actually nothing to do with the prophecy at all, but a particular construction technique that they did use in other places, but this is just one of the best preserved examples of it. There's a stone wall there that is just stones that are irregular, but fitted so precisely together that they are actually waterproof. They have stood the test of time with basically no preservation, and the wall is completely firm after thousands of years. And I love that this is possible, that this is known, and that this is a thing that we get to see and experience, since, we tend to have this idea that construction techniques in the past were inherently inferior, and they're just not. So if you ever have the chance to go to Delphi, I highly recommend it. It's really a fascinating experience. But back to our game. A trip of a few weeks through scarcely populated regions. So they're probably coming in from the north or the east. Most Greek and Roman settlements cluster around the coast. That's for ease of transit. The terrain is pretty mountainous, hilly. It's hard to build roads through. It's hard to connect with other settlements. So a lot of Greek cities tend to be on the water. Actually, a lot of cities in general tend to be on the water, but in around the Mediterranean in general, they viewed territory not as land owned, but as water surrounded by cities. So, like, when you look at maps of the Roman Empire and you kind of go, huh, this isn't as big as I expected, well, the reason is that it includes the entire Mediterranean and often into the Black Sea. So that's why they would be scarcely populated, is because if they're not going along the coast. Antiope shrugs and answers casually, "Of course I remember. A damn eventful trip. We even nearly got attacked by bandits once. If we hadn't spotted their lookout and made a detour, things would have turned ugly." Now, Antiope, we've been told, is very athletic, good with weapons, good with hunting, so she's probably there as bodyguard, and this is a smart thing to even if you are skilled in arms, you don't want to actually face a fight if you don't have to, especially when you're outnumbered, which, if it's just the two of them, they would be. She displays a crooked smile at the evocation of mist violence. "Do you remember what we discussed during those long days and nights?" Antiope thinks for a few seconds, gathering her memories. "Actually, I don't. Is there something I've forgotten? Something that you told me? Or that I told you?" She suddenly raises up her defenses, searching for a trap. Oh, and you can see her expressions changed. That's cute. I reassure her. "Far from it. Actually, it's normal you don't remember, because there's nothing worth remembering. We pretty much didn't talk to each other back then." "Sure?" I think sure is probably part of the next sentence. "Sure, we did exchange civilities and factual data about our environment and planning, but that's all. No actual conversation." Okay, her expression has returned to calm. "Ah, yes, wasn't really talkative back then." "Withdrawn would be a more accurate word. But slowly you began to speak more openly. Can you explain why?" This is not the best dialogue I've ever encountered, but you can see where they're going. "I never really thought about it. I guess it happened naturally at first. At first we were pretty much strangers traveling together, and then I was more wary than friendly. But I'm not the kind to fake amicability in such situations. It's only with time passing that things got better." "How?" "How?" She seems completely lost. "How did they get better?" "I guess I learned to trust you, began to relax more with being with you, and damn, Ambrosia, you're far better at putting this healing stuff into words than me." She pours herself a new cup and takes a sip before continuing. "You're trying to make me say something, or have a point through rhetoric. I honestly find that quite boring, and even a little unfair. If there's something you want to say, just say it." I mentally swear. "Fine, can we discuss this somewhere else? This place is a little too crowded and noisy." She looks down on the feast she prepares for herself, then sighs exaggeratedly. Looks like we have some bots. How do I... Oh, whatever. They can stay, I guess. "Fine, let's do it." She stands up and I follow. Together, her pouting, me trying to keep my heartbeat in check, we go away from the small, hot room. I didn't really plan that much ahead, and I decide to just walk until I find an appropriate place. After several minutes of Antiope's complaining, our random meandering finally ends in the perfect location. Ah, a new scene. I don't recognize this painting. Dogs, definitely a common sight in Greece. Fountains like that, not so much. But, oh well. The moon in the clear sky shines upon a beautiful garden, the pale light drawing many strange shadows from the gray flowers on each side of the lane, sometimes sparkling upon an early, or late, drop of dew. The path leads to a small fountain with stone seats around for the tired and those needing to have a long, not rushed talk. The air is really cold, but thanks to that, the place is void of people. So when I say probably wouldn't have a fountain like that, what I'm looking at is sort of the construction of the thing. You do definitely have fountains, sure, all over Greece and all over Rome, but they tend to be a little bit less wasteful, I guess. They tend to be more of like a trough with a spout, and they're often sort of one-sided against something, although not always. But the sort of like multi-tiered shooting water up into the air, nothing quite so elaborate. Not for Greece, certainly not at this time. But you do find places where there's sort of like a garden with like a little trough fountain and some seating. Even now, you'll find that. More often, the fountains are actually in more populated. They're sort of on the streets because water is considered something that everybody needs to use. And so, I mean, we've already established that this is in somebody's estate where it's quite wealthy, and so they would probably have their own fountain, but it's a little odd to have it out in a garden. Um, the air is really cold. I wonder how cold really cold is for where they are. Like it's not quite clear where in Greece they are, and there are places in northern Greece where it gets snowy, and um, even back then we do find words for snow and ice. They're not unfamiliar with it, but cold is relative, and so I wonder how cold it really is. And for those of you for whom this is Christmas Eve and are having a nice freezing and possibly even snowy day, I think we are probably not talking about that. Antiope passes beyond me and sits casually on a bench, her legs crossed, resting on the edge of the pond. Pond? Okay. Well, if it's a pond rather than a fountain, that would be more likely. And now are you ready to talk? I take my time to settle by her side in a more formal and less provoking position. What exactly is provoking about that? It just seems relaxed. Um, I don't know. I'm not thinking we're doing too well on the, romance angle of this so far. Personally, in my experience, I would have just waited for a quieter moment rather than forcing the issue if we were eating like that. Especially since she didn't seem very receptive. I think so. I take a deep breath and let the words flow in. The point I'm trying to get is that our relationship evolved. We started as strangers under the same roof, and we slowly but surely became the best of friends. Oh, best friends, are we? Antiope crosses her arms and appears to think. Quite a long introduction for an obvious statement, but I guess you're preparing for what's next. How our relationship should evolve from now on. I have been thinking about it myself. Okay, that's more promising. I simply cannot hide that my heart started beating faster than a hummingbird flaps its wings. There's a seriousness I'm not used to in Antiope's voice as she continues. A hummingbird? They don't have hummingbirds. She probably would have said sparrows, especially if they wanted to make a reference to Sappho. I think we talked in my first stream on this game about the sparrow's fluttering wings. We've been going like this for more than a year, I guess. We've had our hardships. Neither money nor glory deigned reign upon us, but overall, it was a pretty nice adventure. We've had a good deal of fun. Partook in some amazing events, including this one. I also learned a lot, and I think you did too. Okay, maybe this isn't so promising. However, it's obvious, even for me, that we've reached a turning point. I've checked our planning for the next months, and I couldn't miss the pattern. Except for a few surviving long trips, we're not going to move much. The reason is that you gained a bit of fame in the region, and several people have already commissioned you for their events. This is incredible, but it's a clearer sign that you're about to settle in. Soon your patron's support will be enough for you to stop having to travel for days to reach a miserable shrine in the middle of nowhere just in time for the yearly festival in hopes it will boost your career and fill your purse. So we've talked about this a little bit before, and, this is, I would say, pretty on the nose for how a poet's career might go. Once you get a bit of fame, then patrons from different cities would start commissioning you, pay your way for a season maybe, have you in for big events. So this is pretty reasonable, and I think Antiope is leading up to you don't need me anymore. You're about to jump the big gap between poor errant artist and comfortable resident artist. Which of course means you'll soon have no more use for a full-time scout. I'm completely paralyzed, my tongue frozen inside my mouth. I didn't expect the conversation to take such a turn, and can only listen as Antiope continues her monologue. So I've searched for new opportunities, and I've found some. Especially, there's a caravan going to Thrace which caught my interest, whose departure from Athens is planned in 2 months. I was getting a little bored with our usual moves, and a trip abroad sounds like fun for sure. So don't worry about me. I've got myself covered. Okay. Not exactly what Ambrosia was hoping for, but nice and practical. So Thrace, the Thracian barbarians, sort of the next country over. It's off to the east, and so like they're not really that far in terms of culture or language or anything. And if Antiope really is Amazonian, that might be headed towards home for her. I think I didn't even breathe for the whole duration of Antiope's speech. As for her, she picks herself up, ready to go. Did I cover all your worries, or is there something else you wanted to tell me? Antiope just explained to me lengthily how she'd prepared everything to quit me, and even if she made some efforts to make it look like she does this for my own good, significant efforts for someone normally quite blunt, she couldn't help but remark she was starting to get bored. My mind is overloading. I prepared myself for anything but that. Is there anything else you wanted to ask me? It's quite cold there. I think she means here. The tone of her voice suggests that we should go back inside, where heat, food, and drinks await us. Well, I'm not ready to give up. Should at least say something if she's going to quit anyway. I refuse to let it end like that. I gather all my courage and I rise. Antiope, you're completely missing the point here. She cocks an eyebrow. She's not used to me contradicting her, or even raising my voice. I did want to speak to you about our future. I step back, draw a big breath, and go. Why does she step back? But on a more personal point of view. Antiope looks confused. It's not about our careers, it's about us. As people, as we are now, as we may be in the future. Oh, Ambrosia, honey, you are really bad at this. too far in to back down, but I still cannot help but postpone the ineluctable. Antiope is not helping, constantly fidgeting on her seat as she is. I try to focus. I kneel to look at her right in the eyes. I thought they were standing. What I'm trying to tell you is the exact opposite of what you'd guessed. I don't want you to leave. I want you to stay until the cruelty of the gods takes us apart. The cruelty of the gods, presumably here meaning death, although... Oh, I guess I have heard that metaphor, and especially if we were going to move towards personification of death as a god, Thanatos, which is something that is not uncommon in Greek mythology, and sometimes Hermes, who is considered the psychopomp for Greek mythology, the one who ferries the souls from the land of the living to the land of the dead. I need a last break, a last breath, and here rolls the thunder. Antiope, I love you. Antiope's reaction is priceless. She just stares at me, completely lost. If I was in the mood for a good laugh, I could giggle almost endlessly, but I'm not. It's not exactly where I would put the word priceless, but... no. Her answer is disturbing. She said it calmly, without hate, actually with a bit of affection. No, you don't love me. You love the part of me I have let you see. And believe me, if you really knew me, you wouldn't try to get closer. You would cower in fear. She stands up. I think I should move forward with my agenda. The sooner we part ways, the better for both of us. I'm totally astonished. I try to speak, but Antiope seals my lips with one finger. You're the best friend I've ever had, Ambrosia. And that's why I must go, before screwing everything up. It's not you, honey, it's me. Is it, though? So, this is an interesting conceit, and it has nothing to do with ancient studies content, but just as somebody with some experience of this kind of discussion, Antiope is not interested. And that's fine. That's just fine. You know, she can do that. However, and she is being nice. Like, you know, she is saying this with affection. She's not angry. But to assert that you would screw everything up, that you don't actually know me, that's usually not true. Like, usually the things that make people say that kind of stuff are things that can be overcome if you would just communicate. And, you know, she has already said that she kind of doesn't want to communicate, so I guess fair. And on those words, she leaves. She simply walks away, abandoning me there. I'm unable to pursue her. I don't understand anything anymore. Okay, it appears we have a time skip. There's no word to describe how relieved I am to find Antiope at our rendezvous point, as planned. After searching for her all night, I'd convinced myself she'd vanished for good, fleeing by the main road under cover of darkness. To see her in the flesh again is the best gift the new day could offer me. That's a pretty unusual reaction, actually. Most people, after being turned down, need a bit of space. Or, which maybe she is trying to do, maybe she just doesn't believe it. Goodness knows that, you know, if she believes herself to, like, really understand other people's emotions, she wouldn't have gotten this far if she hadn't, like, convinced herself that Ambrosia felt the same. Or, sorry, that Antiope felt the same. So, who knows? I guess we'll find out. However, I'm quickly disenchanted. Antiope is physically there and she does her job, but she does just that. She is cold, distant, and at lunch she would evoke for the first time, not the last, her accelerated planning. So so she's still kind of hoping that Antiope will change her mind. It's not going to happen at this point. I'm kind of wondering what we're even doing here. In the following weeks, I will try to understand, try to make her talk about her sudden change of behavior, but from that point onwards, she will simply be more secret, more withdrawn, more absent also, sometimes disappearing for full days while we're in town, usually coming back with bruises she refuses to talk about. Okay, that's a weird one. My emotions are a complex mix. There is love, but also I'm afraid. The harder she tries to hide, the more pressure she puts on herself. Her temper has shortened radically. The slightest vexations release her rage. She's a hornet's nest on two legs that could break at any moment, unleashes the fury of nature over whoever is there at the wrong instant. Now there is a good Greek metaphor. They do talk about, well, mostly bees and mostly positively, but hornets in particular are a very solid metaphor for rage, something that a Greek would think of. Namely me. And so, as the day of our final separation that she herself decided is closing in, if my heart rejects it, it wants for time to stand still until I manage to fix our relationship. My brain is starting to long for it, that it may come before the executioner's sword falls on my neck. Okay. Fade to black. Credits? Anything? Well, I guess that's the end of the game. A little bit unfinished when you get a bad ending, I guess. Um, so that was really fascinating. The ways that they had it go on. One thing I did want to talk about there is the complete acceptance that this would be a normal expression of love. Um, that Antiope would not be weirded out by a woman expressing her affection. It would just be a normal, accepted sort of thing. Totally reasonable. Totally reasonable for the time, for the relative location. Um, Also, would not necessarily preclude either of them getting married to a man to have a kid. That's considered sort of normal for relations in the ancient world. Is whatever you do on your own time, fine, but it's your duty, especially if you're upper class, to get married and have children. And then also for women not to sleep with other men so that their children might not be the incorrect lineage. Um, you do get men sleeping with other men all the time. You do get women sleeping with other women. Talked about less, but certainly present. Um, the ancient Greeks were not shy about erotic art, erotic poetry. Sappho frequently wrote about love affairs with women. Um, it's speculated that she was also married. She certainly had a child, and there's no indication that that child is considered illegitimate. So probably that's exactly what happened. Is she got married to carry on her line, and that's fine. But she was in love with women. Um, and as long as her husband didn't take offense to that, then whatever. Um, which is not to say that there's never any problem in the ancient world in general, or in Greece specifically, with same-sex pairings, but it tends to be more about exclusively choosing same-sex marriage. In Greece, it tends to be people who reject the traditional marriage bed, and shirk their duties, as it were. And adultery, which is specifically considered a married woman sleeping with someone else who could get her pregnant. Now, there are some indications that there might also be some trans stuff involved there. Certainly, trans people existed at this time. We have myths about trans people. Hermaphroditus was intersex. Caeneus was born in a female body and receives a favor from the gods, which makes him into a man physically. There are stories about what is his name? There are plenty of stories about this in various forms. And one thing that always has stuck out to me is that when the playwright Aristophanes, one of the few comedians that we have substantial work left from, talks about the tragedian Euripides, he there's one particular play called the Thesmophoria Zeusi, where Aristophanes makes the joke that Euripides would know how to make a man pass as a woman. And this seems to be describing Euripides going about life as a woman, which is really interesting to me. And there are all the turfy claims of woman hating that would go along with such a thing, which is fascinating and lovely. But I've gotten very off track here. So thank you all so much for coming with me on this journey. Oof, I'm just going to leave that up for now. I have had a lot of fun with this weird little game, and if I go back and get a different ending, I might let you know about it on a future stream. I'm not exactly sure what I will be streaming next week, but I am not gonna take a break. I'll let you know. It'll be up on my Patreon and probably on my Twitch, or on my Twitter and Mastodon. Yes, those are the words. And you can follow me on Mastodon at Zillable, at wandering.shop. My Twitter, I will continue there as long as it's feasible, posting blockchain delenda est for as long as I can. I just don't have a lot of confidence. So, I'm not exactly sure what my next game is going to be right now, but I'm not going to take my 2-week break yet. I am going to start a new game next weekend. For those of you celebrating, I hope you had a lovely solstice. It's been a happy Hanukkah for me. I hope it is for you as well, and I hope those of you celebrating Christmas have a lovely time. And I will see you in the new year. Mwah. Keep learning, friends.